get it all the time in North America from people who say you've got to read William James and have had to be able to judge other people's subjective experiences, which is something that's by definition impossible to do.
Right.
If it's real to them, why can't you respect it? I mean, this wouldn't be accepted in any other field of argument at all. The oppression people are under is the critical thing about them. I had a debate with a very senior Presbyterian in Orange County. I asked him, because we were talking about biblical literalism, of which he wasn't an exponent, but I said, well, what about the graves opening at the time of the crucifixion according to St. Matthew? Matthew, I'd rather say. And everyone getting out of their graves in Jerusalem, walking around greeting old friends in the city. I was going to ask him, doesn't that rather cheapen the idea of the resurrection of Jesus? But he mistook my purpose. He wanted to know if I believed that had happened. That was what he thought.
Right.
And he said that as a historian, which he also was, he was inclined to doubt it.
Right.
But that as a Presbyterian minister, he thought it was true. I thought, well, all right then. No, I'm seriously, for me it was enough that I got him to say that.
Right.
I said, in that case, I rest my case, in fact. I don't want to say any more to you now. You've said all I could say.
Yeah, yeah. Well, there's one other chip I'd like to put on the table here. There's this phenomenon of someone like Francis Collins, or the biologist you just mentioned, someone who obviously has enough of the facts on board, enough of a scientific education to know better, and still does not know better or professes not to know better. And I think we have a cultural problem where, and this was actually brought home to me at one talk I gave. A physics professor came up to me at the end of the talk and told me that he had brought one of his graduate students who was a devout Christian and who was quite shaken by my talk, and all I got from of this report was that this was the first time his faith had ever really been explicitly challenged. And so there's something about that. It's true to say that you can go through the curriculum of becoming a scientist and never have your faith explicitly challenged because it's taboo to do so. And now we have engineers who can build nuclear bombs in the Muslim world who still think it's plausible metaphysics that you can get to paradise and get 72 virgins. And we have people like Francis Collins who think that on Sunday you can kneel down in the dewy grass and give yourself to Jesus because you're in the presence of a frozen waterfall, and on Monday you can be a physical geneticist.
Well, according to our friend, the great Pervez Hoodboy, the great Pakistani physicist, there are people who think you can use the jinns, the devils, and harness their power for the reactor.
It's almost tempting to fund such a project.
Yeah, and it seems, and I gather that, again, I can't get over him still, the respected Tariq Ramadan of St. Anthony's College, Oxford, says in his book, I'm told, that he believes in jinns too.
Right. Right.
I hope I'm not doing him an injustice. I've been told that in his book, In the Steps of the Prophet, he says as much. So one is up against things that are flat out primitive and superstition.
I think it may be easier than we're supposing to shake people's faith. There's been a moratorium on this for a long time. We're just the beginning of a new wave of explicit attempts to shake people's faith, and it's bearing fruit. And the obstacles, it seems to me, are not that we don't have the facts or the arguments. It's these strategic reasons for not professing it, not admitting it. Not admitting it to yourself, not admitting it in public, because your family is going to view it as a betrayal. You're just embarrassed to admit that you were taken in by this for so long. It takes, I think, tremendous courage to just declare that you've given that all up. And if we can find ways to help people find that courage and give them some examples of people who have done this, and they're doing just fine. They may have lost the affections of a parent or something like that. They may have hurt some family members, but still I think it's a good thing to encourage, and I don't think we should assume that we can't do this. I think we can.
Yes, it's almost patronizing to suggest that we couldn't. I mean, to suggest that it shouldn't, that it's not. On the other hand, I think we all know people who seem to manage this kind of split brain feat of, as Sam said, believing one thing on a Sunday and then something totally contradictory or incompatible in the rest of the week. And There's nothing, I suppose, neurologically wrong with that. I mean, there's no reason why one shouldn't have a brain that's split in that that kind of way.
But it is unstable in a certain way. But and I'm sure you're right that people do this, and they're very good at it, and they do it by deflecting attention from it. Yeah. And let's start.
But how you can live with it?
Let's start focusing attention.
How can you live with a contradiction in your?
By forgetting that you're doing this and by not attending to it. I think what I would love to do is to invent a memorable catchphrase or term that would rise unbidden in their minds when they caught themselves doing it, and then they would think, "Oh, this is one of those." Cosmic shifts that Dennett and Dawkins and Harris and Hitchens are talking about. Oh, right, and they think this is somehow illicit. Just to create a little more awareness in them of what a strange thing it is that they're doing.
Yeah.
I'm afraid to say that I think that cognitive dissonance is probably necessary for everyday survival. Everyone does it a bit.
You mean tolerating cognitive dissonance?
No, practicing.
Actually practicing it.
Practicing, because, I mean, I don't know, take the case of someone who's a member of MoveOn.org. They think the United States government is a brutal, militaristic, imperial regime that crushes the poor and invades other people's countries. But they pay their taxes. It's very, very rare that they don't. They send their children to school. They do their stuff. You know, they don't act all the time as if 10% of what they believe is true.
Right.
Yeah.
Partly because it would be impossible. Same with people in the 50s who, members of the John Birch Society, who thought President Eisenhower was a communist. Okay, you get up in the morning, you believe that. The White House is run by the Kremlin, but then you have to go and get the groceries.
Right. Right.
And do all that stuff.
Yes, why aren't you dropping?
You still have to go and do it.
Too many commitments,
But you absolutely wouldn't be challengeable in your belief. It would be very, very important to you, but there would be no way in your life, your real life, of vindicating or practicing the opinion that you have. And I'm sure that the same is true of people who say, well, I shouldn't really prefer one child to another or one parent to another, but I do. I'm just not going to act as if I do.
Right.
All kinds of things of this kind.
But what do you think as educators?
Or Senator Craig saying he's not gay. I'm thinking in his own mind he's absolutely sure he's not.
Right. Yeah.
But he can't manage his life by saying he is, or that he isn't.
Yeah. Yeah.
So a question I wanted to ask was this: we should ask ourselves what our real objective is.
Yeah.
Do we in fact wish to see a world without faith? I think I would have to say that I don't. I don't either expect to or wish to see that.
What do you mean by faith?
I don't think it's possible because it replicates so fast, faith, as often as it's cut down or superseded or discredited. It replicates, it seems to me, extraordinarily fast, I think for Freudian reasons, principally to do with the fear of extinction.
So you mean faith in supernatural paradigms?
Wish.
But why would you not wish it?
Wish thinking. And then the other thing is, would I want this argument to come to an end? With all having conceded that Hitchens really won that round. Now nobody in the world believes in God. Now, apart from being unable to picture this, I'm not completely certain that it's what I want. I think it is rather to be considered as sort of the foundation of all arguments about epistemology, philosophy, biology, and so on. That it's the thing you have to always to be arguing against. The other explanation.
It's an extraordinary thing. I don't understand what you're. I mean, I understand you're saying that it'll never work. But I don't understand why you wouldn't wish it.
Because I think, as a bit like the argument of between, Huxley and Darwin. Huxley and Wilberforce, or Darrow and William Jennings Bryan. I want it to go on.
Because it's interesting.
I want our side to get more refined and theirs to be ever more exposed. But I can't see it with one hand clapping.
You don't want it to go on with the jihadists. I mean, there's a certain face of this.
No, but I don't have a difference of opinion with the jihadists.
Well, you do in terms of the legitimacy of their project.
No, not really. No, there's nothing to argue about with that. I mean, there's a simple matter of survival. I want them to be extirpated.
Or then move it down to the people who are blocking stem cell research.
That is a purely primate response with me. They're recognizing the need to destroy an enemy in order to assure my own survival. I have no interest at all in what they think.
But it sounds like you're
really, we haven't still come to your question about Islam, but no interest at all in what they think. only interested in refining methods of destroying them.
Okay. In other words, you've simply given up
a task in which, by the way, one gets very little secular support.
Yes.
Most atheists don't want this fight.
Yeah.
The most important one is the one they want to shirk. They'd far rather go off and dump on Billy Graham.
Well,
because on that they know that they can't, there's no danger.
I think that because we find the idea of exterminating these people just abhorrent, and we think that besides it will,
no,
it will breed them
extirpating.
Extirpate.
Yes. Complete destruction of the jihadist forces. Extermination, I think, has to be applied more as a species or to...
No, but Christopher, going back to your thing about, it sounds as though you like argument, you like having, it's almost the theatre of having an intellectual argument which would be lost.
Well, I would rather say the dialectic, actually, Richard. In other words, one learns from arguing with other people.
Yes.
And I think all of us around this table have probably enhanced or improved our own capacities as reasoners.
Yes, but I mean, there's plenty of other things to reason about. You can having won the battle against religion, we can go back to science or whatever it is we practice, and we can argue and reason about that. And there's plenty of arguments that are really worthwhile.
But it'll always be the case that some will attribute their presence here to the laws of biology, and others will attribute their presence here to a divine plan that has a scheme for them.
Well, that's
and you can tell a lot, in my view, about people from which view they take. And as we all know, only one of those views makes sense, but how do we know that? Because we have to contrast it with the opposite one.
But let me make an analogy here, though.
Not going to spare.
Because you could have said the same thing about witchcraft at some point in recent history. You could say that every culture has had a belief in witches, a belief in the efficacy of magic spells. Witchcraft is ubiquitous, and we're never going to get rid of it, and we're fools to try. Or we can try only as a matter of dialectic. But witchcraft is going to be with us. Well, and yet witchcraft has almost without exception. I mean, you can find certain communities
not at all. Not at all.
No, I mean, real witchcraft as
is
in
completely ineradicable. It spreads like weed, often under animist and Christian.
No, I don't mean
not in the Western world.
I mean frank witchcraft. Witchcraft of the evil eye, and instead of medicine, you have.
You think you've got rid of that?
I think fundamentally we've got rid of that, yes.
But in any case, don't you want to get rid of it? I mean,
not at all. There's currently a campaign to get Wiccans registered to be buried in Arlington Cemetery.
Well,
but
Wiccans
are to witchcraft as Unitarians are.
Right. They're not real. I'm talking about a willingness to kill your neighbor because you think that there is some causal mechanism by which they, through their evil intent, could have destroyed your crops psychically. Or cast an evil eye upon your... I mean, it comes in ignorance of medical science. I mean, you don't know why people get sick, and you suspect your neighbor of ill intent, and then witchcraft fills the void there.
No, one wouldn't say in such a case that one wished to be... one didn't wish to be without it. That we've lost something interesting to argue with.
But we are effectively... I mean, we're not dealing with the claims of witches intruding upon medical... Don't go to alternative medicine and acupuncture here. I'm talking about real witchcraft,
well,
medieval
I was about to do that very thing. Yeah. And the Washington Post publishes horoscopes every day.
Yeah. Astrology is yet another matter.
But astrology is a
astrology is not going to be eradicated.
Okay, well, but it doesn't need to be eradicated.
No, but you're confusing whether it's going to be eradicated and whether you want it to be eradicated. And it sounds as though you don't want it to be eradicated because you want something to argue against and something to sharpen your wits up.
I think that is, in fact, what I...
But in fact, instead of thinking about eradication, why not think about it the way an evolutionary epidemiologist would and say, what we want to do is we want to encourage the evolution of avirulence. We want to get rid of the harmful kinds. And I mean, I don't care about astrology. I don't think it's harmful enough. I mean, it was a little scary when Reagan was reportedly using astrology to make decisions. But that, I hope, anomalous case aside, I find the superstition that astrology is important to be relatively harmless. If we could only do the same thing, if we could only relegate the other enthusiasms to the status of astrology, I'd be happy.
Right. Well, look, you don't accept or you don't like my answer, but I think the question is going to be asked of us. It was asked of me today, actually, again on the TV. It said, do you wish no one was going to church this morning in the United States?
Right.
What's your answer?
Well, I've given mine.
No,
Richard's disagreed a bit. The answer I gave this morning